Today's video in object-oriented programming in Python, we're just going to answer the question, what is object-oriented programming in Python, and just explain what that means about the structure of a program and why it's favorable in Python. Just to give a reminder, if you haven't taken our Intro to Python course, the link is up here at the top. It is a prerequisite for this course, so you should be taking it before you get into these concepts because they're more advanced. We cover things like arrays, loops, just very basic introductory programming concepts in the intro course. This one's going to be more about the structuring of programs and how to manage objects, things like that. So yeah, the link's at the top over here. So I'm just going to get into what is object-oriented programming in Python. Object-oriented programming is a programming paradigm that provides a means of structuring programs so that properties and behaviors are bundled in individual objects. For example, an object could represent a person with properties like a name, age, and address, and behaviors such as walking, talking, breathing, and running. Or it could represent an email with properties like a recipient list, subject, and body behaviors like adding attachments and sending. So basically what that means is, and this is from the course docs, but what that means is everything you're doing in a object-oriented perspective is based around the creation of objects, properties associated with those objects, and then functions that operate on those objects. So what that all means is if I create an object, that would be a noun. So you could create a person, and that would be an object, and an object's a noun. But that person could also have certain adjectives that go with that person, like a name, a height, a weight, an address they live at, age, things like that that describe the person. Those would be the adjectives, which are like variables that hold certain values to define, help define the object. And then that person can also have behaviors like walking, running, talking, things like that. And those would be like functions or verbs. So objects would be the nouns, adjectives would be the variables, and then verbs would be the functions that operate on the objects. So that's the way we think about programming when we're doing object-oriented programming. And Python supports object-oriented programming, so that's what we're trying to cover in this course. To go back to the course docs, put another way, object-oriented programming is an approach for modeling concrete, real-world things like cars, as well as relations between things like companies and employees, students and teachers, and so on. Object-oriented models real-world entities as software objects that have some data associated with them and can perform certain functions. So again, it's just you have objects, those objects interact with each other through functions, and they have certain variables that describe values associated with those objects, or like adjectives. Another common programming paradigm is procedural programming, which structures a program like a recipe, and that it provides a set of steps in the form of functions and code blocks that flow sequentially in order to complete a task. So we're not getting into procedural programming. If you want to, you can look some of that up on your own, but this course is about object-oriented programming. In object-oriented programming, everything is based on objects, but in procedural programming, it's just, you don't define objects, you just execute a series of steps. And Python can be coded in that way, but that's a different way to treat the language, and it's a different way to model a program. But the key takeaway for this video would be that objects are the center of object-oriented programming in Python, and they don't only represent the data as in procedural programming, but the overall structure of the program, and like the idea behind how you're trying to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish in your programs. So I'm going to get into classes a little bit in this video just to explain what an object is. And how they can relate to each other, Although the next video is when we're really going to start getting into classes. So I have a sample program I've been working on here. It is a blackjack game. So I wanted to create my own blackjack game, but instead of using money, it would just use points and keep a tally of how many times players beat the dealer. And I defined a bunch of objects to represent different things in the game. So there's the player objects. The player objects would just be, you can enter your name, and you'd have a score associated with your name, and that would be the player object. You also have a deck object, which represents the deck, which deals cards to players. And then that deck is based on the card object, which is an individual card. And cards have different attributes, just like a deck and a person do. So the simplest objects you would have to define in a blackjack game would obviously be a card, since the entire game is based on cards. So in the card class, so just to explain what a class is, a class is a user-defined object. So if you had like the line x equals 7, this will create an integer object in Python automatically. So if I did, well, actually, it can't because this isn't a finished program. But if I did a print statement and I found the type of this object, it would tell me it's an integer, and the integer would be type, or the object that I just created, and it would have the value 7. But if you are creating your own objects, you can use classes, and then you could define attributes on your own. You can define how it behaves on its own. So instead of like using the addition operator to perform a function to add one number to another number, you could define your own functions to operate on the objects you create. So in this class, I created a class card. I'm not going to explain the syntax too much. I just want you to see that card is the name of the class, which means it's the name of the object, and these are the adjectives or the attributes that go along with that card. So each card has a suit, each card has a value, and then each card is worth a certain number of points in the game. Points in this program, for me, just means the value of a card in the context of the blackjack game. So in blackjack, all the face cards, like Jack, Queen, and King, are worth 10. The number 10 is also worth 10, and then all the numbers are worth what they're worth. And then an ace in blackjack, you can either count as 1 or 11 points. And the idea in blackjack is to get as close to 21 or hitting 21 as possible without going over. If you go over 21, you bust, and you lose the dealer. But if you stay under 21 and you still beat the dealer, then you win. If you were playing for money in a casino, you would win money. But in this game, you would just win points. So I use points. I use score, and I use score in the player class to keep a tally of how many times the person's or a player's beaten the dealer. But I use points in the card class to represent how much the worth of each individual card. So if I created a card object, I could give it a suit of value and a number of points for blackjack. So that could be like the ace of hearts, and then it could be worth the value 11 points, because you're allowed to make your aces worth 11 points in blackjack. You could have like the 6 of diamonds, and then that would be worth 6 points, and you could have any other card you want. But a deck is 56 cards, because there's 13 different cards, and then there's 4 different suits. So that adds up to, sorry, not 56 cards, that adds up to 52 cards. It's 13 times 4. But you have 52 cards in a deck, which I get into in the deck class. But just for the card class, you see that there's attributes that belong to the card, and then these are functions that I define in the card class that can operate on the card. So, for example, I wanted to print a message at certain points in the program that just says like ace of hearts or 6 of diamonds, things like that. And if I ever want to if I ever want to use that function, it would be coming from the card class. So class card, just take away the card as the objects. These values are, or these attributes are the adjectives, and then these functions that go with the class are the verbs. So this is what you can do with the objects. This is what helps explain the object, and then the object itself would be the card. So yeah, that's just a basic introduction to object-oriented programming in Python. And again, objects aren't necessarily created by you or classes. They can also be things like integers, strings, anything. Anything that has a value. So if I had x equals 7, that's an object. If I had x equals the word hello, this is a string object, and again, the string is just a message. And yeah, you could create your own objects, or you could use objects throughout your program. So yeah, thanks for watching this video. Check out the rest of our courses at coding-bootcamps.com, and don't forget to take the intro course if you haven't. The link's up here. Thanks.